the sky trembled. Massive rifts cracked the atmosphere, revealing the dark expanse of space. Hovering in low orbit above Earth, the alien fleet cast an unholy shadow over cities already consumed by chaos. Towering ships with jagged, bone-like structures appeared less like vessels and more like predators waiting to feast. Their weapons were silent, but the stillness itself screamed impending doom. Riley McCoy stood frozen on the tarmac, staring up at the behemoth that would soon bring humanity to its knees. He wasn't supposed to be here, not on the front lines, not preparing for battle. He was just a pilot, a man who had spent the last few years trying to put his military past behind him. Yet now, despite his reluctance, his feet were planted firmly on the ground of Earth's last, desperate defense. Behind him, the hum of the emergency landing bay broke the silence. His fellow volunteers were boarding the ship that would take them to the heart of the enemy's invasion force. They were few, too few, but they were humanity's final hope. Riley shifted his weight from foot to foot, fingers tightening around the straps of his flight gear. "McCoy, get moving," came the gruff voice of Sergeant Luca Reyes, cutting through the tension like a knife. Riley turned, meeting the eyes of the older man who had seen more battles than anyone cared to count. Reyes' eyes were sharp, calculating, and his tone never wavered. "You might not have signed up for this, kid, but you're here now. We don't have the luxury of second thoughts." Riley opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. His throat tightened. It wasn't fear, not exactly, it was more the weight of realization. This was real. This was happening. They weren't training anymore, the alien ships above them weren't simulations. His heart thudded heavily in his chest. He wasn't just a pilot anymore. He was a soldier. "What's the plan?" Riley asked, finding his voice after a moment. Reyes turned, his eyes narrowing in thought. He wasn't here for speeches. He was here for results. "We infiltrate the mothership, sabotage their main reactor, and cripple the fleet. Simple, right?" His mouth twisted into a grim smile. "We'll need to work fast. They're not just going to let us waltz in." Riley's gaze flicked to the massive starship ahead of them, its hull gleaming in the dimming daylight. It was intimidating, even more so knowing it was filled with the unknown. Mia Hahn appeared at Riley's side, her face unreadable as she adjusted the weight of the equipment on her shoulders. She was the scientist, less inclined toward brute force than Reyes, but with her knowledge of alien technology, she was their best chance of survival. "You're quiet, McCoy," Mia remarked softly, her voice steady. "Didn't think a man like you would be scared of an alien mothership." Riley forced a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. "You've never had your life depend on flying into the unknown, have you?" Mia's eyes softened, but only for a second. She glanced back at Reyes, then said, "I've got the data on the mothership's layout. If we make it past the initial defenses, I can pinpoint their reactor core." She hesitated before adding, "if." There was no time for further discussion. Reyes moved ahead, and the group followed in silence, the tension between them palpable. As they boarded the ship, the gravity of what they were about to face hit Riley. The rest of the world, the comforts of normal life, were now a distant memory. Inside the ship, everything was stark and metallic, the air thick with the scent of recycled oxygen. The hum of the engines reverberated through the walls, a constant reminder that they were already speeding toward the belly of the beast. Riley settled into the cockpit, his fingers lightly brushing the controls as if testing their reality. His heart thudded again, louder this time, as the doors to the ship closed behind them. There was no turning back now. Reyes's voice crackled through the intercom, sharp and commanding. "We have one shot at this. You all know the mission. In and out. No heroics. No mistakes. Humanity's survival depends on what happens in the next few hours." The ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere, its engines roaring to life. Riley's hands trembled on the controls. There was no more room for doubt. No more second-guessing. He didn't care if he wasn't ready. Earth needed him. A flash of light from the outside indicated their approach to the alien mothership. Riley gritted his teeth. No going back. His gaze shifted to the view ahead. Earth, bathed in the cold glow of a setting sun, looked peaceful from a distance. Almost serene. But they had no illusions. Peace was a fragile thing, and it was slipping through their fingers. His fingers tightened on the controls. The countdown had begun. The air inside the ship was thick, recycled, and smelled faintly of metal and ozone. The hum of the engines grew louder as they neared the alien mothership, vibrating through the walls like the steady pulse of a heartbeat. Riley McCoy tightened his grip on the control panel, his fingers twitching with nervous energy. His breath was shallow, the weight of what lay ahead settling heavily on his shoulders. He had flown into battle before, but this was different. The stakes were higher, the threat more incomprehensible. 5 minutes, Reyes's voice crackled through the comms, sharp and unwavering. Get ready. Riley didn't need the reminder. He could feel the tension coiling in his gut like a spring ready to snap. The crew sat in silence, each absorbed in their preparations. Mia Hahn, who had been quiet until now, was absorbed in her console, fingers flying over the keys, her face illuminated by the glow of the data stream. She was more than just a team scientist, she was their lifeline. Her knowledge of alien technology was their only edge, but even she wasn't sure what they would find inside the mothership. You sure about this, Mia? Riley asked, his voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. Mia glanced up from her console, her dark eyes betraying only the smallest hint of hesitation. We don't have a choice. If we don't disable their reactor, we're dead. Everyone's dead. Riley nodded grimly, turning his attention back to the mission at hand. The first wave of turbulence hit as the ship broke through the alien fleet's defensive perimeter. His heart skipped a beat as the proximity warning blared. There were no words for what lay ahead, only the cold, brutal reality of their mission. Through the forward viewport, the alien mothership came into view. It loomed larger than anything Riley had ever seen, its massive, angular form rippling with energy. A dark, shifting surface covered it like some sort of living skin, and pulsating lights blinked across its surface, as if it were breathing. It wasn't just a ship. It was an organism. The sight made Riley's stomach churn. Steady, Reyes barked, his voice calm but firm. We've trained for this. Follow my lead, and we'll get in and out clean. No heroics. Riley swallowed, his pulse quickening. He'd never seen Reyes so focused, not even in the thick of combat. This was the man who had led countless missions, the one who had always been a rock. But even Reyes was human, and Riley could sense the thin thread of doubt that lingered beneath his commander's surface. The ship shuddered as they docked with the mothership's hull. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed through the chamber. Riley's fingers clenched around the flight controls, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to stop. This is it, Mia said, her voice tight but resolute. We're in. The airlock hissed open, and the team made their way into the alien ship's interior. Riley's boots clanked against the hard surface as they moved through the darkened corridors. The lighting was minimal, a strange bioluminescence casting eerie shadows along the walls. The alien structure felt alive, shifting and groaning with each step they took. Riley's senses were on high alert. Every sound, every movement, sent a ripple of unease through him. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though there were no signs of movement. No guards, no automated defenses, nothing. Just the oppressive silence of the alien craft. Mia, Reyes whispered, his voice tight. You're up. Mia nodded, slipping ahead of the group with a device in hand. She scanned the walls, her eyes flicking back and forth as if searching for something. Riley couldn't help but admire her calmness. She wasn't afraid, not yet, at least. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could prepare them for the sheer alien nature of their surroundings. There, Mia said, her voice low but sure. The reactor core is about 5 levels down. We need to find the access point. Riley nodded, moving to follow her. But as he turned, something flickered in the corner of his eye, a strange shadow skittering across the wall. His breath caught in his throat, his instincts flaring. He wasn't sure if it was the ship's design playing tricks on him or something more sinister. "Did you see that?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Reyes didn't respond at first, his gaze flicking toward the same spot. His hand drifted to his weapon. "Stay sharp," he murmured. The team continued, their movements slow and deliberate. Every corner was a potential trap, every hallway a dead end. The walls seemed to shift as they walked, the ship's architecture never quite stable. Riley's heart pounded in his chest as the reality of their situation sank in deeper. This was no ordinary ship, no ordinary enemy. This was an intelligence far beyond their own, a threat that had already claimed countless worlds. "Another turn, and we should be close," Mia said, leading them into a narrow corridor. "Stay alert." But just as she finished speaking, the air vibrated with a low, ominous hum. A ripple of light flashed across the walls, and Riley's blood ran cold. The ship was waking up. Suddenly, an alarm blared, sharp and deafening. The hum of the ship's interior grew louder, and the walls seemed to pulse with energy. Riley spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. This was only the beginning. The low hum of the alien mothership systems grew louder, vibrating through the walls and deep into Riley's bones. The ship seemed to throb with a malevolent energy, as if it were alive, aware of their presence, waiting to strike. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to focus. They had no choice but to push forward. Mia moved quickly, scanning the walls with her handheld device, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We're close. Just a few more corridors." Reyes, always on edge, kept a watchful eye on their surroundings. "This place feels wrong," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Like it's alive." Riley didn't respond. He shared Reyes's unease, but he couldn't afford to give voice to it. They had a mission, and that was all that mattered. They had to disable the reactor before the alien forces could carry out their invasion of Earth. The team continued their march through the eerie hallways, the alien architecture growing more intricate with every turn. The walls pulsed with an unnatural glow, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers reaching for them. Riley couldn't shake the feeling that the ship was alive, that it was watching them, judging them. They reached an intersection where Mia paused, holding up her hand. Her eyes flickered over the data on her device, her lips tight with concentration. "The core should be just beyond this chamber," she said, nodding toward a large, imposing door. "We're here." Reyes stepped forward, his voice commanding. "Stay alert. We don't know what's behind that door." Riley moved with the others, checking his weapons as they prepared to breach the chamber. The pressure in his chest tightened. Every part of him screamed to turn back, to find a way to escape before things went even further off track. But he couldn't. Not now. Not when the fate of Earth was at stake. With a hiss, the door slid open, revealing the chamber beyond. It was vast, its size dwarfing any room Riley had ever seen. At the center of the room stood the reactor core, a pulsating mass of glowing energy, surrounded by twisting tendrils that seemed to move with a life of their own. The air smelled thick and metallic, a faint, acrid odor that burned in his nostrils. "We need to disable it," Mia said, her voice urgent. "If we don't, the fleet will launch in." Her words were cut short as the air suddenly crackled, and the hum of the ship grew deafening. The walls trembled, and a harsh, alien screech filled the chamber. Riley's stomach lurched. Something had triggered the ship's defenses. Before he could react, the floor beneath them shifted, and the room seemed to warp. The walls seemed to pulse faster now, the tendrils around the reactor writhing like serpents. A loud bang echoed as the door they had entered through slammed shut, trapping them inside. "Damn it!" Reyes swore, his eyes narrowing. "We've been spotted. They know we're here." Riley's hand instinctively went to his weapon, but before he could draw it, the chamber's lights flickered, then died. In the sudden darkness, the only light came from the pulsating reactor, casting strange, shifting shadows over the walls. It felt like the ship itself was alive, like it was breathing, watching. Suddenly, a series of metallic clicks echoed around them, and alien shapes began to emerge from the shadows, tall, lithe figures with glowing eyes, their bodies covered in armor-like plating that shimmered with an unsettling, liquid quality. The air thickened with the scent of ozone as they moved closer, their movements fluid and predatory. Reyes drew his weapon, but Mia held up a hand, stopping him. "Wait. We don't know what we're dealing with." "I don't care," Reyes growled, his eyes locked on the approaching enemies. "They're not leaving here alive." Riley felt the weight of the moment settle heavily on his chest. Their mission had just escalated from sabotage to survival. The alien creatures closing in on them were no longer just a threat to Earth, they were fighting for their lives, now just as desperate as Riley and his team. "Get to the reactor," Riley shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. "We need to shut it down before they stop us." Mia hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the creatures, but she nodded. "I'll get to work. You keep them off me." With a grim nod, Riley moved to take position, drawing his weapon and firing at the advancing aliens. The shot rang out, the blast hitting one of the figures square in the chest. It stumbled but didn't fall. Instead, it hissed, its head snapping toward Riley with an eerie, unsettling speed. "Not good," he muttered under his breath, his pulse hammering in his ears. Reyes opened fire, his shots expertly finding their marks, but the creatures moved with an unnatural fluidity, evading the blasts and counterattacking with lightning speed. The air was filled with the deafening sounds of gunfire, the acrid smell of ozone from the energy discharges, and the sickening hiss of the alien creatures closing in. Riley's mind raced. He had to keep them distracted, keep them away from Mia. If she didn't get that reactor offline, they were all dead. He fired again, his shots not landing, but it was enough to buy her a few precious seconds. And then, the ship shifted again. A sharp, violent tremor shook the room, and the reactor began to hum louder, its energy intensifying. Riley's heart skipped a beat as the room darkened further. The alien creatures hissed in unison, their glowing eyes now fixed on Mia. The time for hesitation was over. "Move!" Riley shouted, and the fight for survival became a desperate, all-out war. The tremor shook the room with such force that Riley's teeth rattled in his skull. The air itself seemed to pulse with energy, the reactor now glowing a deep, angry red. Mia's frantic typing echoed through the chaos, but her progress was slow, too slow. The alien creatures, once retreating, now surged forward with renewed intensity, as if sensing the desperation in the air. Their eyes gleamed with malice. "Come on, Mia," Riley muttered under his breath, his pulse hammering in his chest. He could hear the clatter of weapons fired behind him as Reyes and the others fended off the alien attackers, but the enemies were too many, too fast. Riley's heart raced as he took position near the chamber's entrance, keeping the aliens at bay with careful, controlled shots. His weapon's energy pulses echoed off the walls, but the creatures, sleek, otherworldly, and terrifying, dodged with an agility that defied logic. Every blast seemed to graze them, but none were enough to take them down. "Mia," he shouted again, louder this time. "We need that shutdown now." Mia didn't look up from her console, her hands moving at an impossible speed as she typed commands into the alien terminal. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her face flushed with both fear and determination. "I'm trying," she yelled back, her voice strained. "The systems are alien. I can't." "Keep going." Reyes's voice cut through the din, and Riley caught a glimpse of the sergeant's battle-hardened face as he shot down another alien, the creature collapsing in a heap. But more replaced it, the flow seemingly endless. "Reyes, we need to make a run for it," Riley said, his eyes never leaving the shifting alien horde. "There's too many of them." "No," Reyes grunted, firing another round. "We're finishing this. We either take down this reactor, or Earth's dead." Riley's eyes flicked to Mia. She looked as though she was fighting a war of her own in the alien systems, but her progress was agonizingly slow. Her fingers flew over the interface, but something was blocking her. Riley could see the faint flicker of frustration in her eyes as she repeatedly attempted to override the system. Just as a scream rang out in the distance, one of their own, or perhaps an alien, Mia slammed her hand on the console with a cry of triumph. Got it. For a split second, Riley allowed himself to breathe, but it was quickly interrupted. The floor beneath their feet cracked with a loud, monstrous roar, and suddenly, the very walls around them seemed to close in, twisting like a living organism responding to Mia's command. We've triggered the failsafe. Mia yelled, panic creeping into her voice. It's not shutting down, it's going into overdrive. The alien creatures screeched and recoiled, as though reacting to the disturbance. Riley's stomach dropped as he realized what was happening. The reactor was going critical. We have minutes. Mia continued, her voice growing frantic as she tried to reroute the power. I can't stop it from overheating, but I can slow it down. We need to move, now. Reyes, never one to back down, made a snap decision. We make a run for the escape route. McCoy, cover the rear. Mia, stick close. Without hesitation, the group moved, Riley covering their exit with gunfire as the alien creatures closed in. The sound of their shrieks was deafening, the walls vibrating with each step they took. As they sprinted through the twisting corridors, Riley's heart pounded in his throat. The ship was closing in on them, the alien craft's defense mechanisms reacting to their every move. They turned a corner, and Riley caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. The walls were opening, revealing massive alien sentries, towering, bipedal creatures clad in thick, chitinous armor, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Stop! Reyes ordered, his eyes scanning the new threat. We fight. Now. Reyes, Riley began, but the sergeant was already in motion, drawing his weapon and raising it to fire. Riley didn't wait. He fired first. The shot was quick and precise, striking one of the sentries in the shoulder, but it barely staggered. The creature's retaliatory fire struck the wall next to Riley, sending sparks flying. The alien armor was too tough. Get down! Mia shouted, ducking behind a nearby console as a pulse of energy singed the air where she had just been standing. Riley fired again, but this time, he wasn't aiming at the sentries. He aimed for the ship. The alien ship. He could see the energy lines feeding into the sentry's armor, directing power into its weapons. He had one shot. He squeezed the trigger. The beam pierced the energy conduits with pinpoint accuracy, causing a violent explosion. The sentries froze for a moment, a screeching wail erupting from their throats before they crumpled to the ground in a pile of twisted metal and alien flesh. We're not done yet, Riley muttered, sweat dripping down his forehead. We keep pushing. As they continued down the corridors, the alarms began to wail, and the ship seemed to groan, its systems finally beginning to fail. The walls cracked and shook, and it was clear, this alien vessel wasn't long for this world. Mia's voice was grim over the comms. If we don't get out now, we're all going to burn with it. Reyes's eyes locked on Riley. You heard her. Move. They turned one last corner, and ahead, the escape route was in sight, a narrow hatchway that led to the ship's exterior. Behind them, the reactor was building toward its final explosion, the countdown in motion. They had no more time to waste.